Hi, this is Kate from Generate Magic, and today I want to talk about this whole notion of desire and why some goals or some desires seem more elusive or more out of reach than others. And so I used to think that if you wanted something really bad, then it created a lot of resistance, and that the resistance became like an impediment or some sort of roadblock to getting your desire. But something about that wasn't quite adding up. Like I realized that there was something missing in that argument. And so I thought about it more deeply and just reflected on my own life, both on things that worked out and then things that didn't work out. And I recognized that it was actually kind of the opposite. That it was a lot of times when things didn't work out, it was because I truly didn't want it, at least at a deeper soul level. Like I wasn't really like that personally invested in it. And there's been a lot of talk in this community about like soul desires or heart desires versus egoic desires. And to me, it's not really about the desires themselves. And plus, that particular argument doesn't really hold up to me because for one, it's it's a very subjective term. And then on top, like what makes a desire an egoic desire? And then also you see plenty of people that our society would deem as being egotistical, and yet they're leading what would be considered successful lives. And there's also, of course, the whole cliche of the evil millionaire or the evil billionaire. And so obviously it's not just about the desire, like the desire of being somehow good or pure. And there's something more to it than that. And so I realized it's more about how you relate to the desire. And so like if you see the desire as being an egoic desire, then that definitely is going to be a roadblock, right? Or an impediment, because part of you is not fully aligned with it. Like part of you is perhaps feeling guilty or feeling selfish for wanting this desire because you see it as being an egoic desire. But for me, what it comes down to really is this whole idea of not being fully invested in this desire at a deep personal level. And sure, you can definitely achieve things either through conscious manifestation or just through achieving things in the normal way without being invested in it, right? But at the same time, I think the investment makes it more likely to persist when you encounter challenges. And so this is both on the very literal level, like let's say you're learning a new sport, right? Or any sort of new skill, you're going to encounter challenges at first. Like you're going to encounter obstacles at first. And so, but if it's something that you're deeply invested in, you're going to persist despite those obstacles. And then persistence, as you might have heard about, kind of talked about more in the context of manifestation, it's persisting in your ideal, even when things that are happening on the surface level seem contrary, right? And even when you're encountering like all these challenges. And so, which itself can be very challenging, right? It can be a very challenging mental game. Like sometimes people like to kind of simplify it, right? Saying just persist. And well, yeah, it is just persist, but at the same time, it's not always so easy, right? But if it's something that you really, really want, if it's something that you're really invested in, then you are much more likely to persist in it. And so I think there's been a lot of different ventures that I've tried over the years, especially when I was young and broke. And one of the things that I did was selling Herbalife. And so even though I think pretty much with everything that I've tried to do to make money, there was always some level of interest in it. Like I wouldn't do crypto or real estate because I just have no interest in either of those things. And so the interest definitely had to be a component, and also kind of feeling that by doing this thing that I would benefit people in some way. That was another component. And so with Herbalife on one level, it kind of seemed to make sense. Like I like especially at that time, I was really into health and fitness, and I really liked their drinks to the point where I spent all my money on their drinks, and more so than selling any products. But something about, yeah, just the idea of like calling up my friends and family, it just always made my skin crawl. Not because I thought there was anything bad about it, but just because I did not enjoy doing it. And so it was kind of like as a kid when my parents would force me to take this cough medicine, and I would just force it down just to get it over with. So it was kind of like that when I was making these calls to my friends and family, right? I was like, okay, well, I got to do this. But I was never really invested in it, right? I never really at that deeper soul level. And so I pretty quickly gave up on it. And there were other things where I tried it because at the time it did resonate with me on some level. But then eventually I would just kind of get to the point where it would no longer align with my values anymore, when it would actually feel kind of out of integrity to be doing it or to be offering that service. And so yeah, so there's definitely that component. And so then when it comes to things that you do deeply desire. And so the reason that sometimes these things can feel elusive or can feel like a struggle is not because of the level or intensity of the desire itself, but rather because at some level there's some sort of belief that you can't have it, that you don't fully believe that you can have it, basically is what it comes down to. And so with copywriting, I was able to build a career for myself in copywriting because not only did I have a passion for it, it was something that I really enjoyed, but also because I believed that I could make a living doing it. Even though I didn't believe that I could make a living doing something creative like writing fiction or writing poetry, I pretty much been sold and bought into the whole starving artist cliche. I did believe that I could make a living as a copywriter, and so that's why I continued to persist and pursue that goal over the years, even when I encountered challenges. And so this gets down to faith the size of a mustard seed. So in this case, I had the faith the size of a mustard seed. I knew that even if I wasn't seeing the results right away, that I was going to see them eventually, right? And I didn't care how long it took me to get there. And so when you don't have that faith, and obviously you can still manifest things, you can still achieve things without fully having that faith or without fully believing that you can. But again, I think you're less likely to persist when that level of faith, that level of conviction isn't there, right? Because if you think, oh, this is never going to work out for me, or this is highly unlikely to work out for me, you're much more likely to give up when the going gets tough. And so yeah, so when you don't have that faith, you're more likely to be much more dependent on external validation. And so you want that text, right, to reassure you that that person is still interested in you. Or if you run a business, you're constantly looking at your metrics. You're constantly looking at your views, at your email open rates. You're looking at what sales came in that day. And if you don't receive that instant external validation, then you're much more likely to fall into thoughts of lack and thoughts of frustration, thoughts of why isn't it here yet, fear, like maybe I'll never get it, maybe this will never work out, and sometimes you even quit before you've even made much of a dent, just to kind of spare yourself the disappointment. And so then, of course, the question is, well, how do we develop that level of faith and conviction, and how do we build that assumption? And so obviously that's what this whole thing and all these teachings specifically on the law of assumption are about, right? And there's obviously many different ways you can do it. I think repetition personally is very powerful, because obviously if you repeat something long enough, eventually you're going to start to believe it, right? And also just kind of having faith in the law. and saying, well, okay, I know the law works, and I've seen enough evidence on both sides. I've certainly seen enough negative examples to understand that it can, that it works both ways. And so therefore I'm going to place my trust in the law and kind of use that to help me build my faith and to help me in persisting even when I'm encountering challenges or even when it seems highly unlikely, but to kind of give you a more specific example. So this kind of ties back to the SP video that I made, and sorry, the light's like changing, so I keep having to change angles. And so yeah, sometimes it's just a matter of, like in sports, right? You kind of have to take a time out, or maybe you want to take a time out to reassess the situation. And this time out, I feel like, especially just completely stepping away from the situation for a little bit, can remind you that there are like other things in life, and it can get you out of a state of feeling so dependent on that thing, whatever it is, and realizing that you can really be happy no matter what. Because it's kind of a miserable state to be in. I've certainly been there, when you're always just chasing the next thing. And then even when you get that thing, you're just kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. And so taking a step back kind of allows you to reassess your situation, to realize that you're capable of being happy and being at peace no matter what, which helps you to put you back in your power center. And you're much more likely to be successful when you're in that state of calm and you're not frazzled. You're not constantly looking outside for that external validation, right? And then I think it really just comes down to trusting yourself and recognizing that all of these processes and methods really just comes back to helping you tap into your inner authority, right? And helping you develop your conviction, and even kind of creating your own rules of how things in your universe works. And so I created some of my rules. So for instance, everything is unfolding perfectly. Things are always working out for me. God always has my back. So some of these are my rules that my universe operates by, and they never let me down. They've always proved true, no matter what. And so I would really encourage you to develop your own set of rules as well. And the final point that I want to make is the more you feed your new story, the more, because I realized before I was spending a lot of energy really trying to convince myself of why this couldn't work or why this would never work. And I realized, like, after a while that I was really just wasting like a lot of time and energy. And so instead, diverting that energy into convincing yourself why it can work and why it will work and why it should work out for you. And so that's really what I want to leave you with today. And so the two things you have to ask yourself when it comes to your desires, if something feels elusive, is one, am I fully invested in this? And two, if I am fully invested in this, do I really have that conviction, right? Do I have the faith the size of a mustard seed? And the answer to that is no. Then what can I do to develop that faith? And if not in the desire, to at least kind of develop that faith in myself, because that's really what's most important in the end, right? And so with that, thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful day.